Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled and honored to welcome two guests. First, the author of the upcoming middle grade novel, The Center of the Earth, which is about a Jewish boy who is smuggled out of Nazi Germany by pretending to be the adopted brother of his friend, the daughter of an Ecuadorian diplomat. And we also have a former journalist for the New York Times, who is also a Holocaust survivor. Please help me welcome Darlene Campos and Peter Phillips. Darlene and Peter, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you
My
for having
pleasure.
us.
Well, I almost feel like this should be two separate shows, two different shows, because there's so much that I'd love to discuss with both of you. You both have incredible stories, but since you're both on together, I'll try to be a little more focused to one area, and we'll see that you two do have a tie-in together. So, Darlene, I want to start with you. First, when you first reached out to me and told me about the premise of your book, The Center of the Earth, I found it fascinating right away. I mean, I consume all things history. I watch a ton of documentaries and used to be a history teacher. And this was incredibly compelling and interesting. Can you talk about the premise for those who don't know?
Sure. So back during World War II, it was very hard for Jewish people to get out of pretty much anywhere in Europe, but especially Germany. And one of the only countries in the world that was allowing Jewish refugees into their country was Ecuador, which is where my family's from. And being Ecuadorian, I had never heard of this piece of history until I saw a documentary called An Unknown Country, which was made by the daughter of two of these refugees. And I was really blown away by the story. And then just a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, okay, I need to write a novel about this. So that's how I got the idea.
I need to see that documentary. That's interesting. I'd not heard about this either. So that's why I found it so fascinating. So when did you first start thinking about the story? From the documentary? And so what prompted you to write it, though? I mean, because you mentioned that the documentary, but was there one specific incident that it was based on?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in genealogy, and I really don't know that much about my ancestors. And Ecuadorian record keeping is not always the best. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, my mom has a record from when she was a kid that has a completely different name than what her name actually is.
Oh.
So Ecuadorian records are extremely hard to navigate. So you really have to talk to as many older members of your family as you can. But unfortunately, I didn't do that. So from searching for my own genealogy, I was talking to some older members of my family. And then one of them, he just happened to mention that documentary through the conversation that we had. And then that's when I thought, like, oh, okay, so then my interest in genealogy of my family sort of led me here. So thank goodness for that.
And so what prompted you to start reaching out and start interviewing survivors? And that's what led you to Peter?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. So the story of Jewish refugees finding safety in Ecuador is still very, very unknown. And the problems I was having was that when I was doing research, I was not finding enough resources to start writing a full-length story. I was only finding bits and pieces here, like how many refugees arrived in Ecuador, the names of the ships that they arrived on, but it wasn't giving me enough to form characters and a plot, a setting, all of those ends that go into a story. So then that's when I really had to seek out help through Holocaust museums. And one of the Holocaust museums that I went to was the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC. Mm-hmm. And Peter used to be a volunteer there, so they were very familiar with him, and they put us in touch. And ever since then, we've stayed in touch. We've become friends, and whenever I'm in DC, I make a visit to his house, and we chit chat. So that's how we got to know each other.
I'm going to jump back and forth between the two of you here. So Peter, you were born in Germany in 1931. So from what I read about you, your father recognized the danger for Jews like pretty soon after the Nazi regime and moved your family?
For the record, let me tell you that I prefer to be called Pete.
Pete, I'm sorry. Okay, yes.
The story is that my father was an amateur musician. He taught himself the violin and the piano, and he got together periodically with friends to play chamber music, and one of the friends was a pianist, and my father went into his library during a break in the concert recital for friends,
Mhm.
and saw an autographed picture of Hitler on his friend's piano.
Hmm.
And that was the signal for my father to get out of Germany. That's all it took. He said, we have to get out of here. And he chose Czechoslovakia because it was a vibrant democracy and it seemed like a safe haven. And in addition, his company, which was based in Germany and in Holland and in New York, had some affiliates in Czechoslovakia and Prague. So he was able to work for the time that we were in Prague.
So did you talk to your dad later on? I mean, you said that he recognized right away. He saw the picture of Hitler in his friend's house. But did you talk to him later on about what those early years were like?
No,
Just
I did not. No, I did not. Like most people my age, um, well, I was very young, obviously, and we didn't know what was going on. Our parents shielded us from
that.
the bad news, and um, and I didn't ask questions. It's one of my great regrets that as I grew up, and I'm still growing up,
Mhm.
that I didn't ask questions.
So you moved to Czechoslovakia, and during those early years of the Nazi regime, so ultimately the Nazis invaded, and you saw the Nazi troops marching into the streets. So
Yes,
what were your memories of that time?
we lived on the ground floor of an apartment house. It must have had a big picture window. I was sitting at the window when I saw the German troops march in. That's one of my earliest, if not the earliest, memory.
So I'm just curious. Did you as a child? You said you didn't talk to him so much, and that your parents did try to shield you. So, but did you have like this sense as a child, seeing that coming in? Did you have this sense of fear, or did you know any better at that time?
I had a sense of anxiety, yes, because my parents, even if they didn't talk to us about what was going on, we could, when I say we, I am referring to my two younger brothers.
Hmm.
I certainly sensed the anxiety um, of my parents, in particular my mother. And my mother was very active in trying to get us out, um,
Right.
standing in line at consulates, trying to get exit permits and visas and so forth.
There. So, Darlene, I haven't even gotten to your background yet, and I will soon. But when you write these types of stories, you obviously did a lot of research. But did you feel like, I guess, like a sense of pressure to, maybe do justice to the story, especially because you interviewed so many survivors? Like, what kind of pressure do you feel as an author then to like honor them and honor their history?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when I first started writing this story, the survivors I interviewed were already well into their 90s, and
I,
Pete is actually the youngest one, so he's still youthful.
hmm,
But when I put the story down into a book, one of my main concerns was how long is it going to take me to, well, number one, find a literary agent and then find a publishing house, because I wanted the story to come out when at least most of them were still alive. And as of right now, only 3 are left of the original 8 that I interviewed, which is not the outcome I wanted, but their children are alive, their grandchildren are alive, so at the very least, the families are going to be able to get a copy of this book now. But that was the main pressure I had, was the ages of the people that I interviewed.
you're still in contact with the families of everyone, even the ones that have passed. That
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because through this story, I really made a lot of friends from it. So I am very glad about that.
so you seem very much like me. I was looking at your background and everything, reading up on you. We're both very passionate about history. So when doing the research and speaking to the survivors, were there things that just surprised you that you had no idea about in general?
Yeah, there really were parts of history that I discovered that are just not written in textbooks, because I think when most people think about history, they think about the broad spectrums of history, like World War One, World War Two, the Vietnam War. But there are so many stories within those umbrellas of history.
Mhm.
One example I can think of is one of the survivors I interviewed. She lives in San Antonio, and she is about to be 95, and we're still in touch. And I go visit her from time to time. The way that she survived was just by chance. Her father was playing, I think it was chess or checkers, with someone on the ship on the way to Ecuador. I'm sorry, no, they were on their way to Peru. And then someone came by to her father and said, "I'm so sorry, your Peruvian visas are fake and we
Oh,
cannot let you into the country. So we're sending you back to Germany." And then there was an Ecuadorian Navy captain on this same ship, and he overheard this conversation and he said, "Don't worry about it. I'll make sure you get into Ecuador." And that's how she and her family got in.
well,
Wow.
incredible. So Pete, I want to come back to you for a second. You mentioned your family moved to Czechoslovakia, and then you also went to Italy. So one of the things when was reading that, I was just curious, like because in my mind it seemed too easy. Like how difficult was it to travel then? What was that experience like?
Let me interject something. Ali knows a heck of a lot more about my family history than I do or ever did. In fact, she printed out a lengthy history of our family, and there are details in there I didn't know.
Wow.
I've learned about relatives I didn't know that existed. She's an incredible researcher. But to answer your question, no, it was very difficult. My parents um, lived on charity, I guess, and handouts, and went out every day to consulates, embassies, and whatnot to get the necessary papers, exit visas, and not exit visas, exit permits and visas. And at some point in Czechoslovakia, my parents played lotto, which was what do you call that? A lottery.
Hmm.
Won some money, which helped pay for the passage
Yeah.
to Italy. Pure luck. But the strain was there all the time. And we sold what little furniture we had in Prague. Um, we slept on mattresses. My mother was up day and night looking for people who had promised us passports. A couple of brothers she gave money to, they disappeared. It was a nightmare, and but nothing compared to what others
Hmm.
went through. In fact, I hesitate to call myself a Holocaust survivor because I think of those as being people who were in a concentration camp.
Hmm.
We were lucky enough not to have that experience.
But even with the paperwork, the proper paperwork, at some point that didn't matter anymore. So I mean, you were very fortunate that you still were able to go to these places.
Yes, we were. We certainly were.
And in Italy, what I was reading, so in Italy you were there for a time, and even there you felt, the Jewish hatred, from people in the village, right? Is that what happened?
Yes, my parents were gone all day long looking for food and documents, and I was in charge of my brothers, twins. They were 4 years younger than I, and so I was their babysitter, as it were. And we went to a park every day and were chased and beaten by
Hmm.
um, hooligans. Not dreadfully hurt, but it was scary.
So your family moved to Ecuador. What just This is what is fascinating to me. Why Ecuador then? Was it known? that this was a safe haven? Had your family heard that it would be okay
They
there?
must have. They must have, yes. Darlene knows that more better than I do.
Yeah, I'm going to come back now to Darlene with that. So, I want to, ask you about that too. So your family is from Ecuador. So I just want to, were you born there?
I was not. I was born in Houston, Texas.
So what did you hear growing up about these stories? With there were refugees and whole Jewish communities from other parts of Europe who fled there. Had you heard anything about that growing up?
I really didn't. I grew up, I would say, in a very American style. Like my first language is English. I didn't learn Spanish until I was about 10 years old.
Hmm.
And it was because my parents really wanted me to, adapt to American culture. But at home, I grew up hearing Spanish. We went to Hispanic churches. I ate Ecuadorian cuisine. So that part of my culture has always been with me. But that's one of the things, though, is that I learned a lot of American history and I never really learned Ecuadorian history. And even though in school I did learn a lot of World War II history, and I even read a lot of World War II history on my own outside of school, this was one part of World War II history that I had never come across. And I was really stunned because I thought, I'm in an Ecuadorian family. Why aren't more people talking about this incredible thing that the country did? So that was one part that I found very fascinating, was that it's unknown even with the typical Ecuadorian family.
And the first time you really heard about it was from that documentary?
Yes. So when I watched that documentary, I was already in my late 20s. So if it hadn't been for that documentary, I still wouldn't have known the history.
Amazing. So, Pete, what do you remember as a kid what the atmosphere was like in Ecuador? Was it welcoming at least, or was it still a little bit hostile?
No, I think it was welcoming. Uh, I was sent to a private school. It was an all boys school, and I was treated well by uh, most standards. Yes,
And
the teacher was very strict. If you were naughty, he picked you up by your sideburns.
uh,
Um, and I still have my report cards. I did better in my school year, uh, school semesters in Quito than I did in America. And unfortunately, although I once spoke Spanish fluently, I forgot it all.
I once
We have
spoke
a house
and
full
I
of
do as well.
downstairs all speaking Spanish.
Well, so had you heard stories when you were a kid? I mean, did you hear stories about what was happening to Jews from the Nazis in other parts of Europe? Had you heard them, or were you aware of what was
No,
going on?
not really. I heard the name concentration camp, the word concentration camp quite often. But although we were surrounded by people who had that experience, um, they didn't talk about it, and I didn't hear anything until we came to New York, when we gave, by we I mean my parents, gave shelter to some family members who were in various concentration camps.
Hmm.
And although then I was a teenager, I still wasn't all that interested in hearing their stories. It all came much later.
Hmm. I'm going to come back to when you moved to New York in a minute, but Darlene, so you wrote to me that you converted to Judaism last year, so which is also
Yeah.
fascinating to me. So what prompted that? I mean, what led you to that path? Because basically, I'm asking because I'm always curious to when people see what's happening to Jews around the world, what makes someone think I want some of that? So what prompted you to go ahead and do that?
So I don't know if I really have a truly solid answer to that, other than I felt like I was home. I felt like everything about this religion makes sense to me. I really appreciate that Judaism encourages questions, because as an amateur historian, I like to ask a lot of questions and seek out answers. So I really enjoyed that as well. But overall, I would say the main part was that I just felt like I was finally home.
Did you have any
Well, it's a
interaction?
better Jew than I am.
Did you? A lot of people who do convert are. So, yeah. So growing up, had you had interactions with Jews in the Jewish community a lot?
No, I grew up in the west side of Houston,
Hmm.
and it's a ways away from the Jewish neighborhood in Houston. So when I was in school, I probably had 3 or 4 Jewish classmates. So not very much. Um, but I give credit to my mom because my mom is the one who taught me the history of the Holocaust because she read the Diary of Anne Frank when she was a young girl because my grandfather gave her a copy of it because he was also very moved by it. So my mom is the one who taught me the history and would take me to Holocaust museums, would take me to see Holocaust survivors speak. So I really appreciate that she did that even as a non-Jew.
Well, I'm curious with that. How was, your family's reaction when you converted?
Very positive. I was very anxious about it initially because I knew for a long time that I wanted to convert, but I just pretended like I was fine inside and yes, everything's normal. Yeah, I'm not thinking about changing religions. So for a long time I just didn't talk about it, and then my mom was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in late uh, 2023. And then a few nights before she was going to have this long 9-hour surgery to remove her thyroid and have her trachea reconstructed because there were cancer cells in her trachea as well. I thought if anything happens to my mom and she doesn't wake up from this anesthesia, I will hate myself for never telling her how I felt. So I just came out and told her, and then she looked at me and she said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you thought you were hiding it from me. I've known that you've changed your views for a long time." So overall, very positive. My husband and I, we remarried in a Jewish ceremony in September, and we had family members and friends attend. So yeah, it went as it went even better than I expected.
Oh, well, welcome aboard. But so
Jonathan, I might add a sidebar, as
yes.
we journalists call it. One of my brothers converted, is now a Christian, which is a very sore point with me. So Darlene sort of
He's
equaled the balance, so to speak.
Well, I want to come back to you, Pete. So, your family moved to the States when you were still a kid. So, do you remember that time? What made you decide to go? And, how difficult was it then? Did you have family here already in where you went? We were in New York?
No, none at all. But my father's company, that is to say, the company my father worked for, I suspect, although I cannot prove this, helped us get the necessary documents.
Hmm.
And but we knew no one here, and we lived in the Highest for the first two weeks, I think, the Hebrew Aid Society, and we moved to Washington Heights at the upper part of Manhattan,
Hmm.
which was heavily populated by German Jews. So we were surrounded by um, people of our background.
Still, what a, really terrifying prospect just to move to a new country. And but also at the same time, I guess a relief to get out of Europe at that time.
Yes, I was lucky that I was put into the third grade when we came here, and the teacher spoke German. I
Oh.
didn't know a word of English, and that helped the transition to a new life.
And you stayed in New York. You grew up in New York throughout your.
Yes,
Mhm. So
and I married a New Yorker.
like I always tell people, like, you can't tell from the accent, but I'm from New York. But so all your family managed to escape the Holocaust except for your grandmother. So she was separate from you living
Correct.
at that time.
I'm sorry.
She was separate. She had not gone with you to any of these
She
places.
had gone to Holland, where my uncle lived. The reason for that, I don't know.
Mhm. How did you find out what happened after?
think Darlene may have told me. I think so. I would have to look up Darlene's Phillips family history. The relationship between my father and his brother in Holland was not good.
Mhm.
I suspect the reason is that my uncle married a Christian woman,
Mhm.
but that's surmise on my part.
Right. So,
I only met him once.
Darlene, I want to come back to you now because one of the things that I fascinated, we keep talking about the history, the love of history. So this is a not exactly related, directly related, but in a way, yes. I was on your website, and you have some seriously fascinating blog posts. I mean, you're very much my kind of people because you have this love of history. But the one that really stuck out is one that you mentioned to me originally was the Jack the Ripper one about the anti-Semitism in the original Jack the Ripper investigation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So that came about from a documentary my husband and I watched on YouTube. The name of the channel is called, I think it's Lemino or Lemino, something like that. It's Lemino. So this YouTube channel has this fascinating documentary on the Jack the Ripper history. And towards the end of it, when the documentarian was listing the names of the main suspects, I noticed that a lot of them had very Jewish sounding names. And then that kind of made me go, is there something beyond this I should know about? And then when I really started looking into the history, I thought, oh my gosh, this is something that I never heard about in any Jack the Ripper documentary or book that I've read. So by doing research on my own, I really discovered that unfortunately the London police was really focusing on these Jewish immigrants who they felt were overtaking their city and put all their focus into them. And until now, we don't know who Jack the Ripper was. So I think that if the focus had been on really finding justice, maybe they would have found the real Jack the Ripper. But now we'll never know.
It's you have some. I urge everyone to go to your website because you have some fantastic articles there, fantastic posts, and a lot of them history centric. But I loved going through them when I was going through this past week. So you had written to me also that your research for the Center of the Earth led to your next novel. Can you say anything about it a little bit at all or no?
Sure. So I can give you just surface level details. But through Pete, um, about 2 years ago, I think, I saw that the Sobibor Museum, they were looking for histories of people who were victims at the Sobibor concentration camp, or rather death camp. And Pete's grandmother, that is where she perished. So then I gave him a call and I said, the Sobibor Museum was looking for histories of victims. So can you give me a picture of your grandmother and just a little bit about her background, and I'll submit it for you. Well, when I was gathering some extra information about her that I found on the Yad Vashem archives and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum archives, I saw that there was a name that was always like tagged along with her. And the name was Kurt Phillips. And it turns out that Kurt was Pete's cousin. And he was in a Jewish mental hospital in the Netherlands that I had never heard of, and had never heard of the history of the hospital or how progressive it was, et cetera, et cetera. And then that's where I got the idea for my next book. So my next book does take place at this hospital. And well, that's the surface level details I can give. It takes place at this hospital that I feel did play a very important part in protecting especially Jewish children from being deported. Unfortunately, the Nazis did discover the hospital, but it did take them a while to find it because it was located in a very foresty area. So it was hard. You had to know it was there basically in order to find it. So they did do a lot of work in trying to save as many people as they could. The outcome was not the outcome that I think anybody would have wanted, but I really appreciate that at least they really did try to save Pete's cousin, especially.
And one more time, when does the Center of the Earth come out?
So I get to announce this publicly now because my publisher gave me the green light. So the official release date is September 9th, 2025.
Oh, fantastic. And it's available for pre-order?
Not yet, but it will be soon.
Okay. And Pete, I want to ask you, you said you worked in conjunction with the museum, with the Holocaust Museum. So how can people go about, learning more about, the Holocaust and in general, and, specifically a lot of things that, you know, individual people, I guess, that are still around.
There is an archive, and there are people who um, are willing to help you research their ancestry and their history. I haven't done it. That's not true. I did use them once, but I hit a roadblock. But I think the museum is a fantastic organization. But I'm proud to have been a founding volunteer. I started there before the building was built as a volunteer,
Say the name of the
went through
museum again?
the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And if you go through it, I'm not sure I'm answering your question. If you go through it carefully, take your time, you will learn all you need to know about the Holocaust. But it's a self-guided museum, and unless somebody guides you, you may miss the whole thing. Our grandson from Vermont just came here, went to the museum. I was very eager to hear his experience, and it turned out that he hadn't seen anything. No one had guided him.
Yeah.
He went into the basement, which had an exhibit about some other atrocity somewhere else in the world. He missed the whole thing. But if you do it carefully with guidance, starting on the 4th floor and working your way down, you get a fantastic history.
Oh, and to close it off, Darlene, how can people follow you on social media?
So I'm on Facebook. The name of my page is Darlene P. Campos Writer. And I'm also on Instagram. My handle is at Darlene P. Campos. I do have a Twitter or X account, whatever we're calling it these days, but I really don't use it. So that's not a great place to follow me because the last time I posted was probably a year ago. But I am thinking of creating a Blue Sky account in the near future. So you might find me on there as well.
You have to
and of course, my website, darlenepcampos.com.
You have to be covered on every single platform, it seems like. Yes.
I know. It's just too many to keep up with now. And I feel like the older I get, the less patience or time I have to, to learn these things.
I have none of that, Jonathan. I don't even have a smartphone.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both. Like I said, I could talk to you both for hours, but I want to thank you both for taking the time today. And I certainly look forward to the book, The Center of the Earth, and can't wait. And you're welcome back anytime to discuss, especially when your next novel comes out.
I'm hoping that I get a movie part if they sell it to Hollywood.
Well, you and me both.
We'll have to talk who plays you. But again, I really want to thank you both for taking the time today to come on.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Well, this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Darlene Campos and Pete Phillips. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.